Good evening. Welcome.
Happy birthday. What's going on?
Here we are, the grand finale event of this glorious Yoga of Radiant Presence retreat. For the past 3x whatever days, we've been exploring this. Hopefully, if nothing else, the astounding, amazing possibility of what is available in experience, if one takes the trouble to look a little bit closer, has been communicated. And I encourage you to play with this and have fun with it, because it proves to be extremely valuable. The value may not be apparent at first. Maybe at first is a kind of a fun factor or a giddy, trippy, get high factor. Ooh, this is kind of cool. But ultimately, this exploration of and discovery that experience is different and ultimately inconceivably different than we're used to thinking it to be, has far-ranging implications and impact on your sense of yourself and your sense of your world and the general fulfillment, satisfaction, and multidimensional engagement with your life. And this is the reality of what spirituality is. Whether you're being spiritual or not in terms of what you're doing, activities and how society classifies them, the real bare bones essence of what actual spirituality is nothing other than this opening, progressive opening to what this is, what you are, which ultimately is what has been called enlightenment and liberation and so on and so forth. And more to the point, every step of opening to this is itself enlightenment, because it's not like you open to it a little bit, but there's so much more over there. There is so much more, but the so much more is in every little bit, fractally. And of course, this becomes clearer and clearer. The weirdness of this becomes clearer and clearer as you begin to flirt with this stuff. But anyway, all of that's irrelevant, all these classifications and measurements and am I enlightened yet or not? Is completely absurd. The point is that the engagement itself is its own reward, is its own value. And it proves to be cumulative and transformative. It's wonderful. That's my sales pitch. I guess it's a little late for a sales pitch. Here we are at the end of the retreat. Oh well.
Sequel.
So we've looked at a lot, we've looked at all kinds of ins and outs of aspects of ways to play with this and implications of it, and micro examinations of the nuance of it, and more macro worldviews of, wow, this amazing wholeness that is here, and so on and so forth. So, it doesn't matter. I mean, the nice thing about this, it doesn't matter how you engage with it. You're engaging with the real thing. Anywhere, any aspect of it is it. Any aspect of it, any tiny little fragment of your actual experience is transcendental reality. And so just playing with that is itself intrinsically an opening. So this is our last evening together to discuss things. Anything that that is of interest or is in the back of your mind, or seems to be a problem or an issue or anything whatsoever, now would be a good time to bring it up if you have an interest in doing that. Especially if you haven't been, outspoken in these meetings. There's no reason you need to be, but now is your opportunity, just in case, in case you feel an interest in that.
So it seems I'm okay with non-resolution, but there's a fear of I guess it's a form of chaos.
Mhm.
And I understand that the thing creates an anxiety about that. And I get identified with it.
Sure. Well, if you find yourself, if you find yourself in a orientation like that, and if it seems, relevant enough or annoying enough to actually pay, what I recommend is you don't need to jump whole hog headfirst into chaos and letting go and just right off the bat. It's like you can dive into the deep end when you're getting in the water, or you can come up to the edge and slowly, gingerly put your toe in and feel it and come back. So you can just flirt with it and explore something it is, rather than committing to it whole hog if you have concern that it's going to be too much. So this is a very, and that's absolutely fine, because ultimately, when you begin to explore these things, which the mind thinks, oh my God, this is letting go, it's chaos, everything's going to fall apart, this is nuts, it's insanity. That's fantasizing, that's a catastrophizing, essentially. And whether or not it's true, you can discover empirically by taking little snippets and see, well, gosh, there's a little bit of that, and see if the sky falls, see if things fall apart, Not too bad. You try again, and then maybe eventually you pull footing, and so you can just sort of take little nibbles. You can flirt with it. You don't need to. You can be with it at your own pace, if that feels appropriate to you, by all means. And this is very common because the portion of our psyche used to thinking it has to have a handle on things, it has to be in control, I have to know who I am and what I'm doing and what's going on here. It's really important to me. The part of you that feels like that is obviously going to be threatened by any alternative way of being with it. So the trick is to let it, if you let it flirt this stuff, it'll be watching very suspiciously every step of the way. But after a while, it will kind of lighten up. It'll go, gosh, this isn't so threatening. It's kind of more the same. It's not very different than it ever was. Maybe a little bit, and it was jumping out of the walls, maybe, or there's no, the sky isn't falling, or the world isn't exploding, and you get a sense of a sort of desensitization to this more relaxed, more open mode. You get a kind of a sense that it's not so bad, and that just takes the petrifying. Or you can just go for broke, do it all in one pot, locked up for a few weeks, but hey, what the heck? I'll let you out sooner than anybody.
I find with almost anything I take on, I like to stay in like kindergarten forever and then jump all the way to the end.
Well, no wonder you're scared. Be reasonable. Be practical.
No, I'm with it.
No, but ultimately, the thing about this is it's actual. So it proves itself, it verifies itself. So whatever you do, sooner or later, you will see what it is, and then you'll know for yourself whether or not it's it's threatening or whatever. But there's the obvious rational arguments that you can use for your precarious psyche, that how control are you really anyway? How much do you know what's going on really anyway? And you get real here. How much is this just a sham? So how important is it to really cling to it? That's another sort of a rationalist attack. So you really have it together, do you? You really know what everything is. You're really just running every nut and bolt of your life, right?
I'm in complete safety.
Right, right, complete safety. Lucky you.
That's how you do it. I like what you said earlier today about trust. You said it's a trust that's earned.
Yeah, you don't need to trust it. You don't need to trust it a priori. You don't need to have faith. You can try it, and it's like you're walking somewhere you've never walked. You can just gingerly put your foot and see how solid it is, and test it and see, it seems to be solid enough, and then you slowly transfer your weight, and it verifies itself. It's not like you need to commit beforehand. It's not like you need to go in blind. You can go in very, very cautiously if that's the way you work, and it will. And you can see for yourself. Maybe you look at it and you say, "Hey, this is crap. This is stupid. If I do this, it's going to ruin my life. Why should I do that?" And then don't do it, of course. But I argue very strongly that what you will probably discover is quite contrary to that. But you'll discover it, and it will be self-verifyingly the way it is. I mean, that's the thing about all this, is it's actual. This is not some pie-in-the-sky theory that where you're hoping that, if you say this mantra a billion times, when the billionth and first time, the skies are going to open. That's a scam. That's bait and switch. That's just pure, faith or gullibility. This is just, well, here's experience. Check it out. At your own pace, if you want, no pressure, you can play with it, and you can discover by playing with it if playing with it is a good thing or not. It verifies itself. It's not anything that you need to, buy into, or it's not a pyramid scam or some kind of a hustle. It's just, you can just look for yourself and check it out. You find out what it is by looking. So it's very self-verifying. I mean, this is real. This is actual. This is the bedrock of this is that experience. Your experiential field is not a concept. It's not an idea. It's not. It's not a thought. It's not a theory. It's not a hypothesis. It is actual. It's undeniably 100% actual. In fact, it's the only actuality you can ever even actually find. So being with it and exploring it, you're always 100% actuality every step of the way. So you can, so you aren't. It's not. You're not taking any leaps off of any cliffs or anything.
Well, trust. At first, it was kind of judging what I don't know, in some way, and that was fine and so forth. But now it's kind of taken a different character. It's this trust quality was almost like a way to be with or as.
Sure. Well, it's like we were talking about with Larry. It's letting go of the pretense that you have a hand on things. Yeah. The whole idea that is, so if you don't trust this unknown, where does that leave you? What are you going to trust? You're just going to have to manufacture some fantasy to trust, which of course is what most people do. But if you look at that, how wholeheartedly can you really do that? If you know you're doing it, you can do that ignorance, which is a condition that in. But if your eyes are open and you're being empirical about it, if you can't trust reality, you're shit out of luck. Because reality is not good enough for me. I want. Okay, let's see if I can do better. Yeah, right. I mean, that's the beginning and really the end of this whole yoga is actuality. You know, experiential field is actual. This is really here. You know, what it is and how it is and your ideas about people's books about it are all up for grabs. But that this is, whatever it is, right here, right now, is undeniable, factual. How, like if you something to start with, you're on solid ground, as solid ground as there is, whether or not it's ground, whether or not it's solid, it's just by that objective factuality, you're empowered to disprove and reject anything that's any less. So all these ideas and theories and concepts are just, yeah, right, you know, obviously conceptual and so obviously hypothetical, which places them as second-class citizens relative to this factual existence, this actuality that is. It's a touchstone of, you know, is it real or not? Well, you have a real to.
Kind of brings us back to the first day where the deck's loaded because every idea and concept is going to be a misnomer.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
Anything you can think is wrong,
right.
or let's say
Hey, carte blanche.
simply because actuality cannot be captured in concepts. You cannot draw a map detailed and capture an actuality. A map of how detailed it is not going to be Paris itself. It would have to be Paris to be as detailed, and then thing itself, and here you are, it collapses just to this. The experience. But you know that turns really good information because our concepts is what always gets us into trouble in the first place. So you know, letting go of that strategy, you're doing yourself a big favor.
So the following of a routine to arrive, you know, enlightenment, let's say, to arrive. So it's always supposed to show up. The attraction to that.
Sure. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a right that you know do step A, B, C, D, E, and then you get to a certain arbitrary number of steps, and that's the finish line. Wouldn't it be nice if it was mechanistic like that?
Right. And that's
If intelligence and subtlety could be, you know, mechanized, could be automated, an assembly line of neurons.
And then each step, A, B, C, D, is actually moving away from, you know, what you're asking, or what you're.
Yeah, any artificiality is it's not actually a departure from reality, but it's a direction of attention away from clarity, away from inclusiveness, because actuality intrinsically it's slippery, it's open-ended, and any step is defined, but that degree, is not undefined, is not slippery. And so you're fabricating something that is coherent as a vehicle to be within coherence. It's absurd, I mean, this is the fallacy of mystic and assembly line spiritual approaches. Do your 100,000 prostrations, do your 100,000 mantras, and get this blessing and get that blessing, get the other blessing, and then you get your diploma and you're enlightened. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And it would be fabulous if it did, because gosh, that's so simple. This is, this is subtle. This is more.
Requires great surrender. For me,
Well, it requires discovery, and surrender comes with. Because you discover that surrender is kind of what you already have and what you already got, and you already surrendered to this. How could if you're not, you're just pretending not to be. I'm not surrendered to reality. What would that look like? Reality doesn't have me.
That is the mode. This thing is it.
Yeah, and it's so obviously a pretense. And there's nothing wrong with pretense. We spend an awful lot of time doing that, so we're very familiar with that. But it's not particularly efficient in terms of discovering actuality, engaging with it more directly. I mean, pretense can be very interesting to look into as a phenomenon. How can that happen? How can this be so seduced into things being in a way that is essentially contrived and imaginary? But still in all, that's more an advanced study or a side study than the real efficient. It's all about efficiency. I mean, all of life is a spiritual approach. All of life gets to enlightenment because there's nowhere else to get. And the very intrinsic nature of what it is doing is studying itself and learning about itself. But in normal modes, let's say, in the the modes of unconscious, gullibly through their life in accordance with how they're supposed to go through life according to the social society around them and all that, it's very, very inefficient. So this kind of a more, direct approach, it can be called a short path or something, where you are more directly, you're trying to maximize the efficiency by going directly to the thing itself rather than sort of meandering around, and sooner or later you'll stumble on it. I mean, maybe. So, I mean, the very nature of looking at it is a sort of a meandering around too. So it's very strange, intrinsically.
Peter?
Yes.
Along the same lines, because of this other group being here, and because it's part of what I was embedded in before I met you.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't with this particular, but I was with one of the students who was my teacher. It's like this part of me that's always saying out, leaders teaching, I should be doing this like more complicated thing. And you've said a couple things to me, like, you're doing japa all the time, or, I mean, you don't need to get hugged, you can get hugged by other people, when I was talking about Amma tonight, but it's like, I don't know, what is that? I mean, that part that like kind of wants to make, it should be hard, something like that. Okay. I mean, will I just wrestle with that forever, or what?
I don't know. Maybe you have a masochistic streak in your nature, you're like, I'm not suffering enough, this doesn't hurt enough.
Well, I don't know. Defense, it's like a defense seeing, if that makes any sense.
I don't know. I mean, our own orientation to our process is always, complex and what's the word? Like disharmonious, because we're not a single entity. We don't have a single feeling about things. We're very conflicting, conflicting, ambiguous attitudes about things. We kind of like it, and at the same time we kind of don't like it, and we're drawn to it, and we're repulsed by it. And I mean, we're a mess. We're fragmented entities. We aren't a nice, neat, unified, functional system in most cases, at least in terms of how, what it seems to be, the way it presents. So you obviously have elements in your psyche or your sense of yourself, or your sense of what you're doing that are drawn to something like that.
Well, I mean, part of me is like.
But at the same time, you're here. But at the same time, you're here.
Here instead, yeah.
So what's up with that? So it indicates that there's these different, sort of not necessarily somewhat conflicting tendencies.
Right.
And that's part of it. That's interesting. It's interesting how fragmented systems are. How they rarely fall into an elegant nicety in any simple sense.
Right.
I mean, human personalities are, well, you should know, you're a professional. Human personalities are just a mess. We're like a bird's nest. We're just, whatever is found is sort of incorporated into it, jammed together, and it may or may not work well together.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good image.
Debris that's washed down by a storm, in a river out of the mountain, it comes down sticks and rocks and twigs and mud and everything piles up and forms this.
If you pull one out at all. Hard.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting for me to watch my process because, like, I'm so glad I'm not doing that anymore. But there's this little part of me that wants to, like, spy or I don't know what it is, Okay.
You should have had that in.
I had a run on a lane because I used to do Enigma, and I'd seen those kids cut off, and at the same time, it's like I felt embarrassed for them, and I felt the whole thing was like oil and water.
If other embarrassed that you were once like that.
Exactly. No, I mean, my stomach tied up in knots. It would really help here is if you were sanctioned by a bunch of dead llamas. That would really help me.
I am.
I know. Well,
They're smiling down right now. I haven't. But they're not here to tell you that, so I have to do it for them.
Yeah. But I think as a part of it is they were because the spiritual, I hate to theorize, but really quick, it's new in this country. That's only like Easter. And it's like it's sanctioned, And
well, it's cultural.
Right.
I mean, all of this lineage stuff, that the Tibetans have and all that, it's cultural sanctioning. It's sort of like the Bush family. You can be president if your last name is Bush. If you had the blessings of some Tulku, you get to be a high lama or something. It's pretty random.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, technically, this lineage here is a lineage of Amazonian shamanism. Okay, and that is provable. That's demonstrable. So, for what that's worth, which isn't a whole lot. Sorry.
You're gonna bring out the headdress and some fancy stuff. Probably not.
I'm more stealth than that. I wear the headdress on the inside.
You need the Amazon seal of approval on the
Probably
website.
got the tattoo on his chest. If there were an area of, I guess, investigation or endeavor, I mean, clearly, your message is so clear and so practical. It's kind of,
Oh, wonderful.
and yet there's still kind of life to be lived and hours to be filled and movies to be watched and books to be read. Would you recommend anything in particular that might kind of resonate with this?
Doesn't matter, whatever you're drawn to, because there's no contradiction. But what I'm recommending that you say, I recommend so clearly, and anything you do in life, because they're actually one and the same. It's just a matter of, I call it noticing. In any context of activity or engagement or state of waking, sleeping, a dream, or anything whatsoever, this is a perfect or not, and that is engaging directly and efficiently with what I recommend. And you don't even need to do it a lot or heavy-handedly. Just a little snippet, a little taste, a little whiff. you know. I mean, you can be in the midst of reading a book, you know, that plowing through a heavy novel or something that takes you a week to read, and maybe just one little snippet, you're reading something, you just have a little, oh, wow, that's amazing. It's fine, then you go back and read it. It's all good. There's no dichotomy between flirting with reality and going about your business, because of course they're one and the same. It's not like reality is here and your life is over here. How would that work?
It appears that there's certain activities that are pretty unconscious, like really sort of state and to the exclusion of any sort of broader awareness. And, you know, I'm believing that it's better not to be sucked into that stuff. Like so you get to work and you have to plug your head into the wall and, you know, give your
But,
brain
you know,
power.
you make hay while the sun shines. You're noticing when you can do noticing. And any noticing you do is a plus for women. So it's not like, oh, I'm doing my job and I can't do noticing there because I get sucked into it, so I have to quit my job and leave my relationship and this, that. Well, you can if you want, but that's pretty heavy-handed. You don't have to. You know, even if you spend 99% of your time consciously being a zombie lost in your life, if you do a little snippets of noticing now and then, that's a win. I mean, that's the thing about this stuff. It can be easy and fun and just be opportunistic about it. It's not like there's no dutifulness about it or obligation or, gosh, I have to do it, you know, minimum of an hour and a half a day. It's like, no. Just every now and again, whenever it occurs to you, just notice how amazing what you're experiencing is. In any sense, in any parameter, in any or not. Just get a little wow factor, a little zing, a little beauty, a little anything. Just from time to time, that's all. Whenever it happens or is convenient, there's no pressure or obligation or duty involved. And it's you know, I mean, my experience is surprisingly powerful. Just doing this every once in a blue moon, it works under the table. This stuff doesn't work explicitly. It works sort of, you know, it transforms you, but sort of from the inside out, not necessarily from the top down. So just flirting with this, even just having been exposed to this, even just looking at this stuff is, you know, this is your second retreat and we've met a few times and so on and so forth. It's like a seed is planted in you and it's working just because it's there, just because this exposure to all this stuff and, you know, a kind of a, to some degree, favorable or interested engagement with it is present to the extent it is. I mean, that's it right there. That it does its own work, just that. And it all sort of works under the table in the dark and unconsciously in all this. It's not a matter of doing anything and learning anything and remembering anything or anything like that at all. It's like a kind of a subtle reorientation that happens in spite of itself. So since you've been here, you've already been infected. I'm so sorry. There's no cure.
Downhill from there. I do find that there's just more and more of a desire to just kind of do nothing, which has never been my MO. Usually just always doing something, and now it's like, I don't know if maybe I'm just slowing down or what, but or not doing anything now.
Well, none of us is getting any younger.
It's just like they slip by, like time it just goes. I look at my fingernails. You know, they need coffee.
What kind of soccer?
And the analogies in spirituality is it's not like you need to do anything or not do anything. It's not about that. You're doing will happen when required,
Right.
in appropriate ways, or not. But that's not what it's about. I think one way to explain or to look at how the way this works is that the unconscious mind already knows all this stuff. And so when it gets this sort of information explicitly via the conscious mind, or semi, by talking about it in this kind of a milieu, it's sort of like, oh, yeah, I know that. Now you're talking my language. And so it kind of pricks up and wakes up and sort of starts like an excited puppy. It's like, oh, give me some attention. And so it sort of bubbles up from underneath, rather than the conscious mind is thinking, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to do? What's happening here? And of course, there's nothing for it there. What's going on here? Explain it to me. Describe it to me. What's the steps I'm supposed to take? What's the rationale? And it's like, that's just there's nothing there. But the unconscious, it's like, yeah, self-engagement of transcendental energies. Yeah, I'm all about that. And so it just, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm getting some strokes here. I mean, I think that's a reasonable way to explain it. Not that it's true, but it's
No, I think that
it has something to it along those lines. Because I mean, functionally and symptomatically, that's how it works. It's not about doing anything or not doing anything, for that matter. I mean, people that I've been working with for a long time, we get together and hang out and eat meals, and spend most of the time bullshitting. And every now and then we'll talk about something, kind of this kind of discussion where like, what were they talking about? What was that? And that's it. That's a process. That's a spiritual practice. And yet, and yet, things seem to happen. Things seem to pop.
Right.
There's something there. But I think it kind of works under the table.
Well, it's like, the conscious mind, whoever wants to like grab it. So if, my life starts appearing differently, and it's kind of like there's a part of me that wants to know the steps so that I can duplicate it or something like that. And, I've gotten better. It's like, it's a lot looser.
Sure.
And so it was kind of a gift, perhaps, that this thing was here, and it just like, I got to watch these two things going on,
Yeah.
Part of me that wants to be a slave or is masochistic, It's like, oh.
That's available.
It's not totally
That's
gone.
always available.
It's always available.
There's lots of people that are willing to enmesh you in that kind of a scene.
I know. Take my money and my time.
It's interesting for me, Peter, because I always, the conscious mind kind of comes up with some analysis of what it is I've learned this time
Right,
on the
right.
retreat.
Yeah, sure.
And actually none of it makes any sense at all. But it's enough to kind of keep me feeling like it's worth my time and energy to come
Sure.
to the retreat. But there is some of the whole process it's got. I have no real awareness of what it is. And it is interesting that I always find these new angles, that I hear things that stimulate ideas, that I feel like I've learned something, even though, probably, driving way down the road tomorrow, I'll be like,
What happened? Where was I these last few days? It's all a blur. Well, you know, the conscious mind likes to think it's in control and it's the real you and it's got a handle on things. But I think actually the unconscious mind is the real you. The conscious mind is just like a little minuscule shadow of it. So I think as unconscious process actually happens, it sort of percolates into the conscious mind in little bubbles rather than the other way around. The conscious mind thinks it's the other way around. It's like, no, I've got a handle on things, and when I do stuff, it's going to trickle down to the unconscious, and I think that's completely backwards.
We just have to get enough information to the conscious mind to actually bring us to the retreat.
To let it think it's well. That's why I spout so much bullshit. You know, I try to dazzle you with too much information, so the conscious mind can think, oh, why is a lot going on here? Like, we're talking about all kinds of really complex stuff. It's like, you know, forget the fact that it's all gibberish.
It's having too much fun.
I mean, that's a sign for us. We were in the park yesterday, the whole day, we were all having one discussion this morning. We didn't actually come up with
It sort of seems to me that, well, I mean, just in terms of value of retreats, I mean, it fits in with what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get as much direct experience of the radiant presence that I can.
Sure.
Any way that I can. And it is, I mean, the more that's happened, the more that becomes possible. And it is coming, I think, from the unconscious.
Yeah.
I mean, like today we were in the park and I took a photo of a rock, and because I had seen, you know, sort of a Jimmy Durante face in the rock, you know. And so I take the picture, and it didn't quite work, so then I took another one. But, I mean, that picture, first place, wasn't accurate at all. It wasn't accurate with what I thought my memory was of what I was taking. And, you know, it was sort of frustrating. And then I just sort of recall all this that we've been talking at this retreat and realizing, yeah, that photo has nothing to do with what was in, you know, what was in my mind at the present moment, or what I thought my memory was, you know, of it. And that was just an ordinary, you know, little side trip to Joshua Tree, a normal experience.
Sure.
And it's just a matter of just sort of asking why or something. And the answer comes. I probably wouldn't have asked it unless I had known it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have known. I mean, I'm saying, why isn't this photo like, you know, but I knew why. It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, you know, another aspect of this engagement, you know, that I call yoga of radiant presence, is it mostly happens through resonance, through direct energy resonance, which of course makes no sense, and you can't say what it is or even that it is, but nonetheless it's palpably actual and it's potent. And so, you know, which again, the conscious mind can't do much with that. Can't make much sense. Can't get a handle on that. So it's more about sort of feeling flavors and feeling, you know, sort of alignments of energies, and I mean, whatever, you know, you start spouting new age gibberish.
So it's funny, Ram Dass had a post today on Facebook. We hate to bring this name up in this exalted company, but anyway, it's the most ridiculous thing I'd ever read. No, he says, you know, you don't have to do all this intense meditative practice. Oh, good. It starts off right good. Then he says, but you know, and so it can happen in any type of normal daily experience, right? Oh, that's good. But he says, you know, you have to be careful that you won't, you know, it becomes so excitable or so exalted, you won't be able to function. And that was once, you know, I mean,
Yeah, really, why? I don't want to get so exalted that I can't, it's like, are you kidding me? True functionality.
everybody does this every day. They don't have to go to the swimming pool with Ram Dass to do this.
Please.
Too funny.
Oh, my goodness. So this resonance seems to be, it seems to be something you can find not necessarily just here.
Of course.
It's lovely that we can sit in this size of the group and it's this easy and relaxing, but my sense is that there is the offering in other contexts with other people.
Sure, and it's not even about people. Resonance is the normal mode of your being communicating with itself. Or, you know, the snake eating its tail? The snake eats its tail by resonance. You experience your experience by resonance. You may think you're doing it by your senses and your thinking and your this and your that, but in actuality, it's a mysterious sympathetic resonance of all of these energies with themselves on the subjective and the objective side, you know, whatever that means. And, you know, here we direct attention to that fact. So you sort of experience or notice that, to the extent you do, you notice ways in which that happens. And, you know, it can seem to be interpersonal, it can seem to be all kinds, you know, you can get the resonance of the, you know, the desert, the amazing light, you can get the resonance of whatever. But it's not about the specialness of the place or the people or anything like that. It's more about noticing this level of engagement, this level of experiential exchange, which is so immediate and so irrational and nonlinear, and we're not used to thinking in those terms as human beings. It's psychic functioning, psychic engagement. I mean, that's what this is really about. You know, which is not as highfalutin as it sounds. It's just a way of labeling something that intrinsically is the case. And it's possible to notice by degrees that that's the case. And the more you can notice it, perhaps, the more you can kind of participate in it more directly or efficiently. And it's not about being with particular people or being in particular situations. It's about, for yourself, opening to a mode of participation with your own experience, with your own energies, with what shows up in your environment. And again, it's something that already happens naturally all the time, but it's what it is. But when you sort of notice it or engage with it more deliberately or consciously to any degree, it sort of seems to kick up in efficiency or directness or something, rather than be a kind of an unconscious fumbling around, like a drunk in a dark room or something.
That brings up something you told me once, that it's actually quite poignant towards the end of the retreat as well, is that it really comes down to you kind of finding it yourself. I mean, you really have to work it out yourself.
Yeah, it's all about you.
Yeah, and it's really quite, I mean, I'm really on my own.
Of course you are. You're the sole inhabitant of your universe, the sole inhabitant of your experience, not just theoretically, but in fact. There's no one home in Stan land but Stan. And all the rest of us are just apparitions in Stan land, as far as you're concerned. Of course, you're an apparition in Peter land, as far as I'm concerned. That's your problem. Yeah, and noticing that fact is interesting. Well, that's a different perspective from the normal "here we all are" kind of thing. But it's a reality check because it's so directly and obviously true.
And that's 180 degrees from the following kind of other group. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's like
it's empowering because it is you and has been you all along. So you don't need to look elsewhere. There's nowhere else to look. How could you possibly get into someone else's universe?
I think I'll give myself a certificate once I get to 100,000 noticings.
I think you should. You just do that.
I think I will.
And I recommend you cheat. Well, 100,000 a day, there you go. If you're the authority, you may as well bend the rules, right? Hey, I'm the president. I don't have to obey the law.
That is a very tricky thing, this self-authorization, you know, recognizing that we trust ourselves, you know, in terms of how we're noticing or what we're noticing or, you know, whether we're in line, whether we're not, whatever it is, you know, which is very different from pretty much any other practice that I've come across anyway, where you're relying on other people,
Yeah,
often
but that,
paying them
sure.
money. You
Yeah,
know, or,
but all of that's a pretense. You know, this is just what's actually the case. And if you don't trust yourself, then you don't trust yourself. But that's so.
no, but trusting ourselves is, I mean, for me, trusting myself is a huge thing.
Well, yeah,
You know,
it can
energetically.
be, sure.
Just, you know, I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. And I'm not troubled about that anymore. You
But,
know?
you know, dysfunctionality is the path to functionality. Stupidity is the path to cleverness. You know, doing things badly is the path to doing them well.
I mean, actually, you know, the things I'm doing haven't actually changed, just my view of them has changed.
Sure. Well, that's better yet.
I'm not second.
Line of least resistance.
I'm not second guessing myself.
Yeah, just define yourself as a success without having to bother to actually do anything about it. I'm a success now.
Just rewrite.
Yeah, rewrite. You know, just up is down, down is up. I'm a failure, success. Here I am. I've arrived. Nice. That's like using the fine print. Light shouldn't steal. You know, why not? If you can pull it off, hey, why go through process and do things properly?
Well, because we've tried the process,
Yeah.
it hasn't really done anything.
No, exactly. Exactly. It's the back taking some and see what happens.
See, the rip-off is, with intimacy, there's a road to it. And there's some, you know, but, well, you know, and then for the self, that's, wow, got through all this stuff. And now there's this, that, where I can disappear into. And now, we're starting with the disappearance. Where's all the juice I felt as a self? You know, that I was somehow marching through toward this.
You can go there.
Yourself.
You can revisit that anytime you like. That comes with. Nothing is negated.
Right. Yeah.
You have more random access.
Right. You know, as I say that, I recognize pleasure the self takes in owning that, you know, journey, whatever.
But that's more it hooked about the spiritual thing. That's why spirituality is so hard. Not because it's hard to find enlightenment and find reality. It's hard to let go of the juiciness of our soap opera.
Supposedly.
My God, my life as a failure is just so juicy and meaningful and horrible. I love it, you know. It's a heady broth. Whereas enlightenment is just not much, really. Boring. Go back to the soap opera. It turns out that, I mean, the fantasy, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to become plain for nothing. But actually, that at all. You know, you discover, because your normalcy comes along with, you know, realization, enlightenment turns out to be your normalcy. It's not a loss of, or a departure, or a squelching of, or a dissolution of your normalcy. Your normalcy turns out to have been it all along. So you get your cake and eat it. You can still be a failure and be enlightened. That's the good news.
Oh, great.
That's good news. Of course, you'll have a big smile on your face. That's, you know, the idiot on the side of the road sitting there grinning and people walk by and it's, boy, what a loser.
The fool on the hill sees the world spinning round.
We started out talking about intimacy, and to me, my experience is that I'm more intimate with myself. How could, yeah. More intimate with everything since.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, you discover intimacy is what there is. Intimacy is actually a given. The fantasy of non-intimacy has to be actively projected. You know, how could you have any distance whatsoever from anything you're experiencing? That experience is absolutely you. You are my experience when I experience you. How could it possibly be more intimate? Experience by its very nature has absolutely, you know, it's not like your experience is over there and you're over here and some mysterious distance is bridged magically by some magical consciousness or something. When you experience something, you experience it here. And you are here, experiencing it here. You know, so, I mean, intimacy, a notion of non-intimacy specifying intimacy is absurd because there's nothing but, so it's a meaningless word. It would if there was some lesser degree of it. It's like talking about being. Since there's no non-being, the word being is essentially meaningless, ridiculous. Being and intimacy are synonyms. Presence and intimacy are synonyms. Experience, presence, synonyms.
Yeah, and all that is all that's happening. But before there was of intimacy, and now there is.
Yeah. But you appreciate it because, again, it's of erroneous fantasies of the way things are, which is the spiritual problem. You know, we imagine all sorts of horrible conundrums. You know, we imagine our limitations and our failures and our pathos and all of these things, and then we pose them as problems that need to be solved. And without the only solution necessarily. You put it there. You don't like it, stop putting it there. I'm told that there'll be a bacchanalian celebration after this meeting for anyone who would like to attend.
Okay, room number.
Is it in our room?
So,
In our room, great.
So
I got
They specifically were nagging me not to have any parties in our room before this. Oh, sorry.
I did.
Sorry, that's our dirty little.
Here we go.
Where's your room?
Don't start.
So where's your room?
You realize he's lying, right?
We're in.
For comedy.
We're at 1A, foot down the street with the cafeteria on your right, the first building you get to on your left. We're in the room right there on the corner, the first corner you get to. And the hints of various, as well as interesting company and possibly snacks and who knows what else. And a little period of social life. Bring this wild bash to a close. Personally feel very good about this retreat. These retreats are always very interesting to me. I feel an inner drive to make it happen. I feel like, oh God, it's up to me. Here I've scheduled a retreat and I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. So I've had to pull something out of my hat, just to got around it. And sometimes it's iffy. And this retreat was more iffy than most, from my perspective. I feel like, what am I doing here? I'm losing it. But I'm very pleased to say that somewhere in the last 48 hours, I feel like somehow it turned around and sort of caught fire and sparked up. So from my point of view, with how holding up my end of things. So hopefully it seems something like that for you all.
I don't know of anybody it's just awesome that you're pointing to awesomeness. I mean, I don't know anybody else doing that.
What's up?
Well, it's awesome that you're the only person in the room, according to you, and that we happen to be vicariously sort of in on that. And so we're part of the awesomeness too.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if you exist, I hope that's the case reciprocally. Well, why don't we leave it all, which is a very appropriate way to leave it, because that's what it is. It's where we took it up, it's where we were in the middle, and that's where it always is. I'd like to thank Pam's efforts for pulling this thing together. She's the boss. She's the boss. The rest of us are jump to her tune.
Wait a minute. Besides going on that rock climb, was we'll be able to have a retreat here. At first, I thought we weren't. So
there will be another retreat here. Apparently, if any of us are still around, if this place is still.
We'll put it on the website.
Hey, customers, who cares? Tell them to send more money. For every $100, we keep going another 10 minutes.
Nice. Any questions? Pleased with yourself. Any questions? Yeah, everyone knows what the
Yes, put up or shut up sign. You want to keep going, ask for questions. And it better be a good one.
It better be a good one.
So what is it that you talk about anyway?
Nice.
Starkey says, haven't heard any questions. Guess everyone knows what the answer to any question will be. And he puts LOL, so he's like laughing for himself back there.
Well, he'll be with us in our celebration, in our back in the other in spirit. And Peter and
Starkey. And Rana is there as well as Abel, who's an old, long-time follower of yours. She just turned 23 November 6th, so she's
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll wrap up. Up yesterday. And of course, tomorrow is chat to be going by the time 11.
It's around 11.
I think,
Cleaning up.
No, you don't have to do anything.
And that's about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you all for coming.